Peace be with you. Welcome to the Institute of All Intelligent Life. My name is Alan Kiesler, and today is Tuesday, the 25th of October, 2016, and we are continuing our discussion of densities. That is the 7 or 8 different levels, we can say, of consciousness that we are observing on our planet and other planets. And this information, as I've explained before, is coming mainly from the Law of One books. So we'll wait just a minute for some more people to join. And everyone, if you like, you can take a deep breath just to focus and stabilize and purify our consciousness and prepare us to be open to information that may be different than or even appear to be contradictory to ideas we've had before. All right, so we're going to introduce today the idea of polarities, which begin in the third density. But first I just want to make a couple of comments more about the first three densities in order to try to understand a little bit better what this whole topic is about. First of all, as I explained yesterday, the third density is what we call the human consciousness or self-awareness or self-reflectiveness, which generally is not possessed by animals or plants or stones or mountains. So the first density again is what we usually call mineral or water or fire or air, that is the elementals. And so we could identify a crystal, for example, a rock or a stone, a mountain or a certain place, a certain ocean, a lake, a river, as being, a consciousness in the first density. The second density is associated with plants and animals, in which there is more evidence of consciousness, and there is movement, and there is turning towards light. Just as a plant, I gave the example of a sunflower specifically, a plant that turns to face the light. That is an indication of the second density. While the third density is our human consciousness, which above all we just characterize as being thoughtful, reflective, and philosophical even, you might say, but certainly being aware of ourself as distinct from the animal tendencies, which are self-preservation, things like that, eating. But animals generally don't have self-reflectiveness. But they can. So that's what I want to talk about now, is when the lower densities, the first and second densities, do attain a sort of self-reflectiveness which is possible. So many of us have experienced, I certainly have experienced it often, especially in pets. When we see an animal, you can just look in its eyes sometimes, in a cat or a dog's eyes, or a horse or a cow's eyes, or any animal that especially is around human beings a lot. You can sometimes look in their eyes and you can tell, you can see that they are reflecting. They look like human eyes, not just like a dull animal's eyes. So it is possible for animals in the later stages, higher stages of second density, to develop a little bit of that human consciousness, that self-reflectiveness. Now, what is surprising, it is even possible for plants, which have a rudimentary consciousness that, as I explained yesterday, scientists even have been able to connect an instrument which is like a lie detector, which sensitively detects changes, small changes in the constitution of the plant, and they can detect emotional reactions. So plants definitely have emotions and have feelings. But it may be surprising, but even, especially among trees it can happen, plants also can develop a reflective consciousness, which may seem a little shocking, even surprising, but according to the law of one, which again, as I've explained before, was the source of that information is sixth density beings who have a much higher awareness than we generally do. They have stated this, so we can accept it on that basis. And also, as we become aware of the fact, because many people aren't even aware that plants have emotions and have awareness at all, but they do, and even sometimes, although it's not very often, a plant, again, especially a tree, can develop a sort of reflective awareness, sort of think like a human being even. Now, this is very rare, and it's even more shocking, but it is possible, although very rare, for a place, for example, especially a mountain or a lake, which also have consciousness, to develop self-reflective awareness. So I just wanted to point this out, that these distinctions we make between first density, second density, third density, fourth density, etc., and as identified with colors, this is a very good analogy, because colors, just like red, orange, yellow, green, we can easily see that these are distinct colors, but when you get down to it, where is the border between them? Because, of course, the red fades into the orange, which fades into the yellow, which fades into the green, and on into blue, etc. So these are boundaries that we can easily perceive between the colors, yet we know that they sort of run into each other. So in the same way, these distinctions between first, second, third, fourth, etc. densities are not hard and fast rules, and there can even be exceptions where second or even sometimes first density beings can possess the characteristic of third density, which is self-reflectiveness. So I just wanted to start out with that to give a little more understanding about the densities. And what I want to talk about mainly today is about the polarities. And this is a very important point, and actually, by understanding this, it may, as it did to me, it may transform your attitude towards negative or selfish beings. So, in the third density, as I explained yesterday, comes the moral choice. It's a very, very critical stage, perhaps the most critical, and it doesn't last long like the other stages I explained on our planet. The first stage, first density, lasted about 2 billion years, and the second density, according to the law of one, lasted about 4.6 billion years. And the third density has been also existing during that period of time, not in the very beginning, but later. And in this third density, we come to the point where we have the self-reflection, we have the awareness where we must make a choice. And that basic moral choice is to choose, am I going to be selfless or selfish? That is, my service, because, as I again explained yesterday, we are servants, we cannot avoid being servants. But are we going to serve ourselves and our own agenda, our own purposes, our own desires? Or are we going to serve others? And of course, ultimately, serve God. So that is a fundamental choice that we make. And that choice determines our polarity, negative or positive. Negative being the word we use for those beings who are serving themselves, and positive is the word we use to describe those beings who are oriented towards serving others. So what's very interesting in understanding this point is that polarity, which will last then for, generally it doesn't change very easily for the next couple of densities, through fourth density and into fifth density, generally people don't change their polarities, although by the sixth density, and this is also very interesting, the negative polarity cannot continue. So usually in the later fifth or in the early sixth density, the negative polarity beings give up that attitude and turn to the positive. So in the third density, we make this choice. Are we going to basically serve ourselves, or are we going to serve others? And what's very interesting is to understand that the negative polarity has a function. Even, at least this is in our galaxy, it has a very important function, which is to help beings, both negative and positive polarity beings, to make progress or to make advancement. There's a stimulus that comes from the conflict between negative and positive polarities that has a positive value. It has a upward movement. So we use the word evolution, not Darwinian evolution, of course, but the evolution of the consciousness. So the conflict between negative and positive polarities stimulates evolution of both those beings in negative as well as those beings in positive polarity. So this is a very simple point, but it requires some thought and reflection to understand how and why, in our galaxy at least, because I really don't know about other galaxies, but in our galaxy, our logos has set up this system where we have negative and positive polarity beings, the choice being made in the third density during this density that we are mostly experiencing still. And we have chosen, basically, whether we are going to serve ourselves or serve others, and that polarity determines how we act. And although our tendency generally is to look down on the negative entities and to look up to positively oriented entities, and there's good reason for that also, but we should not forget that the negative entities are also serving, we can say, a positive purpose. They are serving a purpose. So we should not look down on them. We should not condemn them. We should just accept that they've made a choice, and that is their free choice. Everyone has free will to make the choice for negative or positive polarity. And those who make the choice for negative polarity are acting out a role which is part of the way our galaxy works. And it's not something we should condemn or look down on. We should accept that's the choice they made, and that's the way they're acting, and we can understand the way that they're acting has a useful, positive even, we can say, function. So this really, for me at least, and I think it would be for many people, it may change our attitude towards negative polarity people, towards selfish people. And there are plenty of them in the world today, and very, very powerful ones. So, and we do, of course, want to fight against them. If we are positively oriented, we will want to fight against the negatively oriented or polarity people. But we should understand, that they have their role also. So we can talk a little bit more about polarities or about densities, but I think I'm going to just see if there are any questions. I mean, it's only been about 15 minutes rather than half an hour, but I just think that this may lead to a long discussion, so I'm going to see if there are any questions. And I just see one comment here, that a tree cried when Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, stopped leaning on it. Yes, that's a very, very good example, that trees, especially among plants, trees especially have well-developed consciousness and certainly emotions, and a tree can cry. Trees can easily cry. So we shouldn't think that these sorts of comments are just some superstition, some old religious belief, but it's very possible for a tree to cry. Yes, thank you very much, Nusrat Jahinji. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and see what other comments we may have. Again, sometimes it's a little difficult for me to read, so I brought my reading glasses here. Okay. Adonis Kemet, Great Rising, King Shalom. Okay, that sounds like a very interesting name. Maybe we'll find out more about Adonis Kemet and your comments there. Um, let's see. All these comments like Ya hal hai, or how are you, etc. I'm not going to answer those. Please make comments that are appropriate to our topic and I will deal with them. Okay, here we have Mary Shaw writing, selfish people win everything, and those who are with positive polarity lose everything and become bad in everyone's eye. Well, that may be true within the context of a civilization like ours, which is ruled by people, selfish people with negative polarity, and controlled basically by, or at least for the past centuries and millennia, largely have been. But that is not the usual situation. So, in the end, it's not what happens. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, when beings come to the sixth density, the negative polarity cannot really be maintained, because in sixth density, knowledge, wisdom has reached such a level that people cannot really maintain that negative polarity. They can see that it's not actually going to benefit them. So in the long run, ultimately, you can say that the positive polarity wins everything. Even the negative polarity entities turn towards positive polarity. But in our present current stage of existence, especially in this civilization that we're, so-called civilization that we're living in today on this planet, there is a lot of evidence that what Mary Shaw is saying here is correct, that selfish people are on top and they come out in front and they whether make the money or get the power or have the control and can get to lead people and guide people and make the decisions that affects people's lives. That's true in our present situation, but in the long run, no. And in fact, I've talked about this before, very, very good news, which has come out from the secret space programs, really, is where this information is coming from. That just in the last very few years, meaning 3, 4, 5, 6, just in the last 6 to 8 years at the most, the situation has changed drastically. That is where negative polarity people were really in control, and they were hoping and expecting that they would complete their plans for domination of the planet. Their plans are now being frustrated. Again, this is by those sixth density beings who have decided to take part in our planetary affairs because they have seen, even though there is a prime directive of not interfering with other cultures, other civilizations, other planets' development, having seen, however, that the negative polarity people have from outside, that is the reason why negative polarity is so powerful in the world, is because negative polarity fourth density beings, especially, they have interfered in our affairs and have guided our planet towards a very, very strange sort of atheistic culture. So the sixth density beings of the sphere being alliance have decided to come and take an active role in our affairs in order to counteract those activities, which the negative polarity people were not expecting at all. They weren't expecting this sort of interference to happen, because for thousands of years it was pretty minimal. But now it's become significant, very significant, and the main thing that they did is that they imposed a quarantine upon our solar system. And there was also a separate quarantine over this Earth a few years ago, although that quarantine of the Earth was dropped. There's still restriction coming and going on the Earth from the other parts of the solar system, but it's not the strict restriction that it was. But the strong quarantine of our solar system continues, and it has been imposed by the Sphere Being Alliance, these sixth density beings, who evidently are the same beings who gave the knowledge of the the Law of One books. So they have now taken an active role, and they are preventing the negative polarity beings, both the third density negative polarity beings who basically have been ruling this planet, what we call the Cabal or the Illuminati, the Zionists, that is the people who are trying to create a one-world government under their control, and their extraterrestrial allies, who are basically the Orion Empire, that is these draconians or these reptilian entities, who are mainly fourth density negative polarity, and there may be some fifth also, but so they have for thousands of years been playing a role in our planet and misdirecting us towards a type of life that is not favorable for our own development and is favorable for their agenda, those negative polarity agenda. But that is now changing, just in the last very few years. So we are all very, very fortunate to be alive at this time when that system that has been in place and has even been increasing for the last few thousand years, and especially the last 100 years or so, and especially even more than that in the latter part of the 20th century, we had a huge increase in the propaganda, for example in the mass media, of the negative polarity cabal. But now that has been stopped. And although it's like when a fan is turned off, the fan keeps going around, but basically the fan has been turned off. So similarly, these sixth density beings have basically turned off the interference of these negative polarity beings, third and fourth density and some fifth density ones. So the fan is still going, that is, they still control the media, they still control most of the governments of the world, but more and more positive polarity, I can even say higher density beings who are living as human beings now, are participating in this stopping of the negative polarities and the creation of a wonderful, long prophesied, what we call the kingdom of God on earth, or pure Islam, or a way of life which is based on love, which is the characteristic of fourth density. So our planet is now moving into fourth density, and although the Cabal and their extraterrestrial allies had a plan and had determined that they were going to stop that from happening, they have basically failed now. And it's not going to happen automatically. This is the wonderful thing about living now, that all of us have an opportunity to participate in this most wonderful event, practically the most wonderful event of human history for the last thousands of years at least, where that event, that expectation that the kingdom of God would be established on earth, meaning that human society would be transformed from negative polarity to positive polarity, that is actually happening now, and we can participate in it. So it's a very, very wonderful time to be alive, despite all the horrible suffering that's going on in the world today. But we can understand that we are in the vanguard of establishing this positive polarity culture upon this planet. And that's really the purpose of the Institute of All Intelligent Life also, to help people understand this is what's going on. So, as Mary Shaw had written, selfish people win everything, and those who are with positive polarity lose everything. No. Yes, you're right that that's the way things have been, but now it's changing. So, Ali Misara Khan has written, those who not love to be rich, they are selfish, and they only think about themselves. If you have money so you can help poors, you can help your relatives, you can help your friends, and you can help those in need, so don't be selfish. Be rich for the sake of others, which will make your life peaceful and ever after eternity. Yes, this is very true, that we should not just think about ourselves, we should think about others, especially the weaker and poorer members of our societies. And that attitude is actually highly to our benefit, and will make our lives peaceful, make our minds peaceful, and even after eternity. Yes, as I explained earlier, we will live, definitely, after we leave this body, and actually eternally. So the more we begin now practicing selflessness, the more we make the choice to serve others rather than ourselves, and especially, as Ali Sahib has written here, for those who are rich, they can have a great opportunity to use their wealth to serve others, and that's to our benefit. So don't be selfish. Thank you, Ali Sahib. Very good comment. Mary Shaw has written, people who are not Muslims, when they ask from us what you will get for thinking about others and being servants, and when I replied it's something Allah will give me at eternity, they used to laugh that you Muslims just live in the world of dreams. Even not only Muslims, there are some other people belong to other religions who are very, very, very good. But then what should be a practical answer for such questions, please? Oh, very good question. This is exactly what we're talking about, that this is not just some Muslim belief or religious belief that if we be servants and serve others and are kind and loving and peaceful and don't work hard, struggle, fight, even kill for our own selfish advantage, that we will benefit eternally. And certainly Allah will give us that. Allah is the giver of everything. And that peace, that eternal peace, and that eternal progress, more than peace, that eternal joy and happiness at being engaged in service, that will go on eternally. Allah will give us that. It's the natural result, actually, of our choice to serve others and to serve God. That the natural result of that is that we will live eternally and we will gradually become more and more peaceful, free of anxiety, and happy as we engage in that sort of service. So the practical answer for some people who criticize this and laugh at this idea is, well, why don't you try studying the science of consciousness? Why don't you read the Law of One books, which present these religious beliefs? We can see these religious beliefs are confirmed, but in a very scientific way. It's a very, very good book. Actually, there are 4 books. It's a very, very good series to do just what you're asking here. What is the practical answer for such questions, criticisms that selfless people are not really going to get any benefit? You can understand as we understand this about the densities, how we progress from mineral, plant, animal, human, higher. As we make this progress, we will become, eventually, everyone has to become positive polarity, because the negative polarity cannot exist in the higher densities. So, I hope that confirms what you're hinting at and answers your question, that yes, this teaching, Muslim teaching, every religion teaches, I think, without exception, the same thing, that we should be selfless, we should serve others, we should, again, it doesn't mean we don't serve ourselves or we don't take care of ourselves, but our basic orientation is not to be selfish and just take care of ourselves, but to take care of others, especially poor and needy people. So now we have something here. I'm glad I have these glasses, because we have something written here in the Farsi Lipi, in the Persian script. Khadam ek aisa ahda hai jo koi chain nahi sakta. Jo koi, I can't really, I'm looking for, I'm not sure if I know that word. Oh, koi chain nahi sakta. Okay. Yes, very nice point. So this mood of serving others, ultimately serving God, this mood can never be taken from us. That's one wonderful thing about it, that once we get established in this conviction, of course we always have our freedom. We ourselves can change polarities. A positive polarity person can change to negative polarity. A negative polarity person can change to positive polarity. But generally, that's not so easy. It's much easier to remain within the polarity that one has chosen. It's more natural. But certainly no one can forcibly, even by torture or threat of death, nobody can take away from us that decision that we will serve. So Mary Shaw is asking about the names of those 4 books. All 4 of the books are called the Law of One series. There are 4 books, and if you just do a search on the internet for Law of One, or Law of One books, or Law of One series, you'll be able to find it without too much difficulty. There are PDFs, there are files that are just available in Word or in, I think that's the way you'd usually download it, and you'll be able to read the entire books. So please do. That's a very, very important series. As I've said before, those who are in the secret space programs are advised to read those books to understand better the background of what they are doing within the secret space programs. And they have a much better understanding than we do, because we have been the products of this miseducation, or as I've said, the diseducation, the intentionally false ideas that we've been taught in our schools and universities. So those who are in the secret space programs, they're aware that this, many of them at least, they're aware that this is what is happening. So they know that there is the possibility of getting this sort of information from extraterrestrial sources. So they are advised to read these 4 books, this Law of One books. So I advise it also. I don't say that they're complete knowledge by any means. I'm sure there's a lot of other things to know that aren't present in those books, but there's a lot of information there that's very, very helpful to understand really what's going on. The Law of One is written by, it is written by a being or a social memory complex called Ra, R-A. And that social memory complex is a 6th density being. In the higher densities, which can even happen in 4th, and usually happens, I think, in 5th and 6th density, that individuals like ourselves come together in a group. Because they're telepathic, they can all understand each other's minds. So by coming together in what's called a social memory complex, or a group of beings who all cooperate together so closely and all understand each other fully because they're telepathic, that type of being is obviously much more powerful and much more knowledgeable than we are in our separate individualities. So that 6th density being called Ra is the author, was the source of that knowledge. But the way, because they don't exist generally in our 3rd density, they don't just appear here, although they can, they decided to make this information available to humanity through a channel. And she was an American woman who passed away not too long ago. And this happened in about 1981. This is a very interesting group of people who were trying to contact extraterrestrial sources of information. And after many, many, many years of effort and gradually developing these abilities to what we usually call channeling today, to contact some other source of information, some higher consciousness, they this Ra began speaking through her to the other members of their group, and they recorded and then transcribed those recordings and printed the books. So the actual author is Ra, the 6th density being. The second one, now maybe you're talking about what I said yesterday. The second one, third one, fourth one, all the 4 Law of One books are written by Ra, and they're called Law of One. The second one that I mentioned yesterday was Seth, S-E-T-H. You can also just do a search for Seth. One of those books is Seth Speaks. This was a similar sort of activity that those books, the Seth books, were also channeled and written by a higher density being who channeled this through a medium, and then those were also recorded and published. So that was the second one that I mentioned yesterday. Okay, Imran Javed has again written in Farsi Lipi, so I have to look very closely because it is hard for me to see. Allah Quran mein फरमाते हैं कि तुम खैर वाली उम्मत हो और लोगों की खिदमत के लिए भेजे गए हो. Very, very nice, yes. That the fortunate ones do engage in the service of others. So thank you very much. Very nice comment there. So we're getting confirmation from everywhere. It's not difficult to understand. Maybe negative polarity beings find it difficult, but positive polarity beings find it very easy to understand, that it feels good to us to serve others. And if we act selfishly, we feel a little uncomfortable about that. Whereas negative polarity beings, they feel very comfortable about working selfishly. So, all right. That's all the questions or comments we have. So I'm willing to stop now unless anybody else has any comments or questions they want to ask. I hope this is quite clear now, and we're going to go on and talk more about the densities and the polarities tomorrow. But I think we've covered a lot of material today, and it's worth reflecting on. And again, I recommend meditate, breathe deeply, meditate, repeat the name of God, or focus your mind on the breathing to avoid the distractions that the mind is always running here and there. So try to meditate peacefully, try to use deep breathing to focus your mind and to make the mind peaceful, and then meditate on, reflect on these ideas about the different densities and the polarities and their function within our galactic history. And we'll be talking a lot more about that. So thank you all very, very much. We will end now. May God protect us all, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 6:30 a.m. California time, 6:30 p.m. Pakistan time.